Hello, Ed. Very good afternoon, and welcome to this next TRED talk, which is hosted by the TREDS initiative at Center for Policy Research. This talk is one in the series that we initiated on the theme of water-centric urban planning. So it was the larger research project is about how master planning could be reimagined to accommodate water and other environmental concerns in urban planning. This research is funded by the National Mission for Clean Ganga. And this is one of those projects looking at the master plan instrument, the statutory spatial planning instrument in cities, and look at how whether we can reimagine this instrument to accommodate these concerns, the new concerns like water and other interests. So it is one of the interests of organizing this series is particularly because of the nature of the scholarship that is there in urban planning, which we believe, and that has been our experience, that it is largely knowledge production is in the domain of practitioners. You don't see a body of work that we can build on. That's what we found, particularly in urban planning and statutory planning in India. So one of the things that we were aiming at is to gather this wisdom, or to distill this wisdom from these practitioner spaces. Having said that, today's talk is not entirely from a practitioner. It is someone who blends research and practice quite effectively. And I'm surprised to learn that actually UDRI, with which today's speaker, Anuradha Parmar, works with as the executive director, was actually founded in 1984. Today's speaker, as I told you, is Anuradha Parmar, who is the executive director of UDRI, which is Urban Development Research Institute, based out of Mumbai, on a talk that is titled Spatial Planning and Transition, Tackling Institutional Fragmentation and Climate Risks in India. Just to quickly, as you can see, she does look into spatial planning and how climate risks could be accommodated or otherwise responded to, and the kind of institutional structures that are out there to deal with these challenges. So just quickly about her, Anuradha is an urban planner and architect with over 2 decades of experience working in UK, US, and India. She is the executive director at Urban Design Research Institute. Sorry, I said it was Urban Development, but it is Urban Design Research Institute, Mumbai. Her expertise lies in the intersection of urban regeneration, conservation, and regional and urban planning, where she brings a systems thinking approach to complex urban challenges. Anuradha has worked at the intersection of policy and practice, engaging deeply with local governments, multinational institutions, and private sector partners. She was part of the strategic planning and implementation efforts within the London 2012 Olympics growth boroughs, aligning regeneration objectives with long-term socio-economic outcomes. Her work integrates rigorous urban policy research with grounded implementation, with a strong emphasis on multi-stakeholder engagement, institutional capacity building, and environmentally resilient planning. Anuradha holds a master's in community and regional planning from the University of Texas at Austin and a Bachelor of Architecture from the Delhi-based School of Planning and Architecture. Welcome, Anuradha, and thank you for taking time to join us today. And also, I should add that, in fact, I got to know about Anuradha's work, though I should have learned about it earlier, when we were part of this working group that was constituted recently by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, looking at this particular challenge of urban to rural continuum, right? So it was an interesting experience. And then we realized that we align on certain subjects, and I I, I thought that there are, the work that UDRI is doing is something that should be shared in this forum. So that's how I invited in. And thank you again for joining us. Just quickly before that, I hand over to you. The housekeeping tips is that, of course, you should put off your cell phones or in the silent mode. And the second one is that we will give about 40 minutes to Anuradha to speak. And after that, we'll open it up. I request those people who joined online to put um, their questions, uh, brief, precise, with preferably with some introduction to understand where you are coming from. And the way we planned is that someone who is controlling this Zoom is going to forward these questions to me on WhatsApp, and I'm going to read it out of my cell phone. So that's the way we'll go about it. Other than that, thank you. Mic bhi de dena.
They gave me some.
No, this is better. Okay, you should use that.
I'll give this to you then. Yeah. All right. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yes. All right. So, okay, fine. So thank you, Dr. Chokula, and thank you, CPR, for inviting me. I'm excited to be here, and I have actually looked through some of the previous TED talks, and they're very interesting, and very diverse, and it's a rich repository of information that is getting documented through these talks, and I hope I'm able to add to that knowledge database. I'll start with actually, I'll structure my talk in two parts. In the first part, I'll talk a little bit about our research. It was taken up over 2 years, where this is a copy of the research, the status report on spatial planning in Indian cities, two-part report where we went to different cities in India to map what was actually happening on ground, because the spatial planning structures and the governance structures we felt were very different. And we thought it was interesting to map them and compare them in a very systematic and a simple way. So that is the first part of the talk, and I'll try to share some insights from that research. And in the second part, I'll do a little deeper dive with an example from Maharashtra and Mumbai, where we'll try to see what are the challenges in incorporating environmental planning within the existing spatial planning frameworks. So that is how I'll structure my talk. This topic is quite complex. The talk is, I'm hoping, not going to be that complex. So just moving on. I think, is it? Oh, sorry. I'm using the wrong keyboard. Okay. So I want to start with this question that, India's growth story, is it a challenge or an opportunity? There are 600 million people that are going to be in the urban areas by 2036, but 65% of Indian cities are in early stages of preparing their spatial plans. There'll be 7 megacities soon, but 68% of the land is still non-urbanized. So I think in areas like this one, which is a new census town in Mizoram, in areas where development is just beginning to happen, I think it is a huge opportunity to put in the right frameworks, put in the right instruments, so that we can protect what we can. And in cities like this Pushkar, which is a municipal council, which is already sort of built up, and in this example, which is Coimbatore, which is already built up, it is a huge challenge, and it is a challenge to put in the right frameworks in place to protect, but also to adapt to react to the ground realities that are already present there. And I think throughout our discussion on governance frameworks and organization structures and our spatial planning instruments, I think these two need to be constantly looked at in parallel to be able to come up with a more comprehensive solution. So moving on, I'll start with this discussion on spatial planning versus master planning. And I know this has been discussed in detail in Professor Bandyopadhyay's presentation. So I do want to start there because I'll build upon it a little bit more as we go along. So in most cases, when we talk about urban planning, we really talk about this level of master planning or development planning, which sits at the city level in this example from Maharashtra in Mumbai, and in most other cities slightly above the city level. But spatial planning is this entire deck of planning consisting of plans above and below the development planning level, where master planning is just one of those instruments. And why I discuss this is because, if you look at the various instruments, then not only do if you look at the various levels of planning, the instrument at play changes as the level of planning changes. So at the regional level, the regional plan is the main instrument, and its goal should also be changing, right? So if we move, it's a larger level plan which maps large infrastructure, its right of ways, environmental features, and future growth areas. And as we come down to the lower levels, at the city level, more details begin to emerge. You start seeing land use plans. You start seeing areas being allocated for amenities. Ideally, there should also be goal setting at this stage where what your city aspires to do should be decided. And then the analysis takes over at the sub-city level, at a zonal level, and at a precinct level, where you start responding to these goals through projects. And I feel these sub-city levels are very important levels for community engagement, because this is where you capture their aspirations, and then you need to have an instrument in place to actually translate those aspirations into projects. And then at a precinct level, those projects start taking shape. So not only do the roles of these instruments change as these levels change, your data requirements change. The kind of data required to produce these plans changes as these levels change. The capacity and expertise required to deliver these plans changes as you go from the regional levels down to the neighborhood and the precinct levels. And also the type of citizen engagement, where most of the citizen engagement happens through suggestion objections, is okay for the higher levels, but as you come down, it has to be more engaging. One has to capture those aspirations, and the solution has to be more than just land use outputs which are there in the development plans. They have to be projects. So why I'm discussing this is because this formed the basis of our research. This was an aspirational framework which led us to create a simple framework against which we decided to map what is happening in various cities. What we did was that we took the levels of governance from the 74th constitutional amendment, the levels that are mentioned in the constitutional amendment, and then we took the levels of plans from various documents where multiple plans are mentioned, right? Whether it is the central guidelines, or whether it is town planning acts, whether it is the URDPFI guidelines. So some form of levels are mentioned in those documents. So we derived a framework from there. And what we realized through our preliminary research was that cities are doing a combination of these levels of planning, and that is what is charted into 25 cities across 23 states and 2 union territories. And we mainly looked at the main cities in each of these states. So we captured our data across 5 themes. The first theme was state legislative structure. So we looked at the state legislature, and we tried to see if there is a mandate to make spatial plans at all these levels. What is the legislation saying? And are they putting a planning authority responsible for those spatial planning functions? So that is what we studied in the first theme. In the second theme of organization structure, we tried to understand what is happening on ground. Who is making the plans? Are all the plans being made? Then we looked at spatial planning capacity. Here we tried to see if there were in-house planners in the departments who could make those plans, or if there were institutional partnerships or support from other institutions to help make those plans. Under monitoring and GIS data management, we mainly looked at if there was a monitoring section included in the planning instruments. And under GIS data management, we looked at the basic structure of data management and if there were any coordination mechanisms in place. And finally, for citizen engagement mechanisms, we looked at, once again, how strong the legislation was in ensuring um, a robust citizen engagement methodology, how strong they were. So under these 5 themes, we then created 15 other sub-themes and about 45 indicators. So then each one of these indicators was converted into an index, a spatial planning index, by giving it weightage. We gave it a numeric value. And a lot of these numeric values are, you can change these values, right, to have a different output. How we ranked our categories was mainly based on how robust our data was across these categories. So our data across the state legislative structure, organization structure, because we were relying on the town and country, the acts, it was pretty direct. As we went below to the other categories, it was through interviews and on-ground research. So the data was robust, but we felt that there could have been more questions. So that's how we've ranked it. And then we scored the cities against this spatial planning index. So I want to put a disclaimer that it is not a ranking system. This is purely a way of measuring what is happening in various cities against a standardized framework with decentralized planning frameworks. So the idea of this index was, for example, for us to see if, how could different cities or different states learn from each other. So now, for example, it would be interesting for, say a city with a lower rank in the state legislative structure, like say an Uttarakhand, I also can't read it, Uttarakhand, or say a Rajasthan, to see what they can learn. Oh yeah, what they can learn from the town planning acts of, say, a Maharashtra, or even a Telangana, right? Or if you look at the capacity section, it would be interesting to see what kind of insights do we have from Gujarat and from Delhi, to see how those capacity sections are scoring well. So it is a mechanism of just comparing and learning from each other to see what is happening in various states and cities, and what can be incorporated in other places. Uh, Moving on. Okay, somehow it is not moving on. Did I do something? Okay, now it is. I think it needs the CPR touch.
Now that we had a break, so quickly, if you could tell how you gathered the data, the scoring.
So there is an index report. So we went on site our teams went on site and there was a detailed questionnaire that was filled. Then we looked at, so if I can, I can show it. So, there is a detailed scoring system for each of the questions under each of the categories, right? So the question, and then based on the evidence that we have, whether it is the act or the interviews or so we've scored the data in a yes, no, and then numbering is given. So it's a pretty detailed methodology, which is all captured in this green book for doing the scoring. So I'll take you through some of the insights that we had. So we started off with this standard question of what guides planning in Indian cities, right? Yes, it is a state subject, and the state legislation is the main document that guides planning. However, what happens on ground is a mixture of a lot of these other things as well. The central guidelines do play a huge role because they often come with funding attached. And then there are other guidelines that impact how teams think about their plans and how they organize their plans. Also, what happens is that in addition to the state legislation, what we saw that while 24 states have enacted their town planning acts, there are 9 states that still have other acts which have spatial planning functions, and they are active. So, for example, in Jharkhand,
Is that one state?
Ranchi has no town planning act active, and we were also very surprised to see that.
As in Jharkhand.
Jharkhand, yeah.
Too, but I think it is a successor state.
Yes. So their act is not active yet. But the reason why it's interesting to see Jharkhand is that, and I'll come to those slides later, but they do have a very robust decentralized system mentioned in the other acts. So in Jharkhand, what happens is that the regional planning aspect is mentioned in their Development Authority Act. And in the Municipal Act, the other 3 spatial functions are there. In Haryana, it's a combination. So there are only 2 spatial planning functions mentioned and none of them in their Town Planning Act. And whereas in Telangana, 3 different things are active. So there is a Development Act, Area Development Act, the Municipal Act, and the Town Planning Act, all sort of mentioning the different spatial planning functions. So this information we gathered and documented, and it was interesting to see that and there is no right answer whether you need one act or multiple acts, but it was interesting to see that many states now were with one act, and most of the amendments were happening in that main act to make it more comprehensive, though in certain cases we did see some amendments happening in these other acts as well. So there is a discussion to have over there whether one should slowly move towards one act, or is there a reason for these acts to be still active. So moving on, I have I have just collated 4 examples here from the 25, just for ease of presentation. We have Gurugram, Mumbai, Ranchi, and Vishakhapatnam. And what you see over there, that colored area is the is the development plan boundary. And the black outline is the municipal corporation boundary. So right there, you start seeing a difference in different states and cities, where Mumbai, in the case of Mumbai, the municipal corporation and the planning boundary is snugly, the municipal corporation boundary and the planning area boundary is quite snugly fit. And this is the case even in a Kolkata, in Panjim, I think in Tiruvananthapuram as well, and maybe in Delhi as well. And then in most other places, the area is slightly larger. Yeah, that's the, no, that is not the metropolitan. That is the development planning area boundary. So,
At least in Visakhapatnam.
yeah, so it is the metropolitan area boundary, but they are making something like a development plan. It is not a regional So it is a regional, yeah, it is not a regional plan. So what we also found was that there are multiple terminologies.
Yeah, the vocabulary is not consistent.
Yes, vocabulary is not consistent. So that is the reason why we anchored our framework in the 74th constitutional amendment, that the governance level and what plan is getting made at that level. So at the metropolitan level, we said, okay, a regional plan. There are a lot of metropolitan bodies making plans, but they are in essence more like development plans for the sake of this report. So then we looked at all the acts and we tried to see which act is mentioning which level. And you'll be surprised. See, Mumbai, Jharkhand, and Vishakhapatnam have their acts mentioning all these levels. And in a Gurugram, only the regional and the city level, spatial levels are mentioned in the act. We also mapped in the act which planning authority has been given a spatial planning function. So once again, in Gurugram, the state region, in most places, the state region and ULB is given that function in the legislation. But if you see in Ranchi, even the ward level was identified in their act as a spatial planning authority. And then finally, what we mapped was what is happening on ground, right? And here, these colored books that you see, the big book represents the regional plan, the orange book, the city level development plan, and the purple book, the zonal plan. And you start to see, how they start to jump, right? In a Haryana or in Gurugram, the most of the plans are being made by the state body. The other bodies don't have any functions. In a Mumbai, the regional body is making the regional plan and the city body is making the city level plan. So they are aligned, but there is no zonal plan being made. And if you go to Ranchi, only 2 levels of plans are being made. There is no regional level planning that is happening and no zonal level planning that is happening. But in a Vishakhapatnam, all plans are being made, but all are being made by the metropolitan level authority. So this kind of comparison and this kind of mapping we thought was interesting to start asking the question of capacity, right? Like how overloaded some of these bodies are, and should there be a discussion or a push to start sort of decentralizing some of these functions? Because your engagement at a zonal level requires a lot of dispersed local engagement. And are the metropolitan authorities equipped to do that? But there could be some pros, there could be some cons. This is a backdrop for that kind of discussion. It is also interesting to map things like this to see what kind of frameworks and what instruments can be put together for cross-border coordination, especially in the context of environmental planning. So what is the structure of the neighboring states, which body to talk to, and which instrument are they controlling? It becomes sort of the patterns begin to emerge over here. And finally, I think this comparison is also essential to ask the question that can the central programs and schemes be designed in a way to create long-term local capacity in these states? These schemes come with funding and they usually have pilot projects in the states. Can they be designed in such a way that they create or they nudge long-term partnerships? Because after all, planning is a subject with long trajectories and you require strong institutional partnerships to continue that. So can that be uh, uh, sort of incorporated in the central schemes? Some other insights that we had were that of the spatial planning levels, right? That 9 states had legislative provisions to prepare spatial plans at all 4 levels. However, only 3 states were preparing spatial plans at all 4 levels. So there was the legislative mandate, but only 3 states are doing it. Then 15 cities were part of a larger regional plan. And this was very surprising to us also. We thought only in Maharashtra this is happening, but there are 15 cities in 15 different states where some form of regional plans are being made. And there are 3 who are doing it without a legislative mandate. And these cities,
Which are those?
this is Dehradun, Shillong, and Kolkata. And then there are these 4 cities that are not doing it despite the fact that there is a legislative mandate to do it. So around Hyderabad, Raipur, Ranchi, and Patna. So some other insights were in terms of devolution of the planning function. 3 states have partial or almost complete devolution of the plan making function to the ULBs. And 7 states, despite having it mentioned in their mandated by their legislation, were not doing that. So once again, these comparisons and these kind of insights become interesting to understand why certain states are able to have a more decentralized framework and certain others are not able to have a decentralized framework. So cross learnings and just questions of what can be done. What we also did was that we converted our insights, converted our index into a checklist, a 59-point checklist, which was very useful to go into an area and try and understand the real needs or the gaps in either their frameworks or the capacity needs. And then we were able to have targeted capacity building programs in various areas based on this checklist. What we also did was, because our teams were going in the field, we were able to capture some examples from the field, some good practices, some interesting solutions, or some small like ideas around partnerships and how they've worked around a problem. And all those things were collated into case studies. And we've also done capacity building workshops using those case studies. This image is from a workshop in Nashik with elected officials. And it becomes interesting when they have real examples to follow from Indian cities. So this was the first part of the talk, and I'll go on to the second one with examples from Maharashtra. But this study sort of, once again, instead of providing solutions, it poses questions and it provides a backdrop for further discussion on these frameworks and on these institutional structures, to say what works, what doesn't work, and also to see, where can we enhance the existing frameworks rather than setting up new ones. Moving on to the second part of the discussion.
Just ask one question instead. Second one. I think it's an appropriate time to ask. I'm Pushpa Pathak from CPR. You talked about, your talk is all about spatial planning and climate risks and so on. But why in your indicators and parameters of assessment, you don't have any indicator for climate risk mitigation measures?
We should hold it because this, I thought it would be a clarificatory question.
It is a clarification.
It is not. It is substantive question is in
Yes.
the way we see it.
The second part of the talk.
We should let her finish that part, I think.
Because we are trying to understand the instruments through which this can happen. So we are just right now focused on the instruments and the structures within which we can embed that.
Let me show you the kind of clarificatory questions that we should ask. You have used quite a few vocabulary. There is also other which you didn't use. Perspective plan, used by Visakhapatnam, not the development
Yes.
plan. Now, we faced this struggle when we were working on it, and some of our team members actually, we thought that the best is to define the spatial planning instrument using scale. If it is 1:10,000, if it is 1:100,000. Did you consider that? And was it linked to that kind of scale?
So more than scale, more than scale,
Let's agree to disagree.
more than scale, I think for us, it was important to link it to an administrative boundary.
Okay.
And that was our premise because we thought that at least 3 levels of planning can be linked to an administrative boundary. And then in our assumption, we thought that that starts solving a lot of problems in terms of data, funding, management. But below the last level, which is the zonal plan, though that is not something that needs an administrative boundary. That needs a completely different methodology. So for us, the guiding principle was the administrative.
Just to clarify.
So moving on to the second part, so far, what we've been discussing are the structures within these colored polygons, like these colored blobs, right? We talked about Mumbai and the region, the metropolitan region around Mumbai. Our study has Bhubaneswar and Orissa, and then Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala. And we saw how different the situation was on the ground in each of these areas. But what about the areas that lie outside these colored blobs? Is there a spatial function to those areas? And if there is there a governance body that manages those spatial functions? And is there an instrument at play? So we don't have an answer to that yet. We haven't done that study yet, but I'll take you through an example of Maharashtra and try to explain what is happening in Maharashtra, even outside these areas, and also try to capture the challenge of incorporating environmental planning into these existing frameworks. So if we look at Maharashtra, the entire state of Maharashtra has about 36 districts and 5 metropolitan areas. These 5, there is Mumbai and the area around it. There is Pune, there is Nashik, Aurangabad, and Nagpur. So these are the 5 big metropolitan areas, and each one of them has a regional plan, and then inside that, there are ULBs with their development plans. Outside these areas, there are municipal corporations and municipal councils that are scattered without a regional sort of metropolitan boundary around them. So there are more than 20 municipal corporations. There are 200 plus municipal councils. There are almost 300 census towns and 2,500 plus villages, all scattered in this area. And we've all seen where growth is, in the last 15 years, we've all seen where growth is going. It's going in areas outside the mega cities. So what really is the framework and what really is the structure to manage that growth? That is also different from state to state. And in Maharashtra, what is happening is that each of the districts, the 36 districts, the entire state is divided into these districts. Each district has some sort of a spatial plan. And it is prepared. I was like, you look like that, and I thought you're surprised to see that.
I am surprised, actually.
Yeah.
I know about the metropolitan regional planning framework.
But
district level spatial planning.
Yeah, so this is prepared by a state level body, the DPVD, the sort of valuation department, Department of Planning and Valuation, something like that. And if my team is listening, they'll be laughing right now because I always get this acronym wrong. But it is a state level body which makes it has some form of a spatial component, right? This regional plan that the district for the districts, you can see that they capture some form of infrastructure, large green areas, water bodies, and in one corner is the metropolitan area plan, and then inside it is the plan of Nashik. So the city has a DP, the Nashik city has its DP, and outside that area would be a regional plan. And even these small municipal corporations scattered within the district boundary, this is like the municipal corporation of Malegaon, they have a small DP, right? So
and who regulates the district? Spatial plan,
It's the state body, the DPVD. DPVD makes the,
TPVD.
yeah, TPVD. It makes the state level plan, and even these small municipal corporation plans, they are made by their own municipal corporations, but if there are census towns and small villages and small developments, all of them come under the umbrella of this district plan. Inside the metropolitan body, what you see here is a map from the MMR, which is the Mumbai metropolitan area, and this is just one of the layers of those plans. And you can see how much, I mean, this is just one of the layers. There are so many environmental layers, and there's a lot of environmental analysis done, and they had come up with buffers, and a lot of those environmental features were incorporated in this development plan. Inside this blank area that you see is full of municipal corporations and councils. So this blank area has like 7 municipal corporations, 7 municipal councils. There are 7 special planning areas, SPAs. So each one of those makes their own development plan. So this orange thing is a municipal corporation which is making its own development plan. And for the areas that lie outside these ULBs, there is some form of a spatial plan being made by the Metropolitan Authority. So
How many metropolitan authorities you have in Maharashtra?
5. So you would think Maharashtra is covered, right? Like that entire state has some form of spatial planning happening in combination with those district plans and those municipal corporations, and all our environmental problems are solved. But there are lots of issues of coordination, and I'll take you through some of those. So in this map, you see these colored polygons, and all these colored polygons represent different ULBs, municipal corporations, municipal councils, and there are also SPAs shown over here. That green area, that dark green area that you see is the only area that comes under the regional plan. The rest of it is all these different ULBs. Now, what happens is all of them are making their own separate development plans with different timelines, all getting completed at different times. They create their own data. To pull together a map like this, we had to pull together these DP outlines from different places. You will not find a map that shows you the land use of this entire area in one go, right? So that is where the challenges start emerging. Data is generated in silos, it is not shared. You don't get to see what is happening inside, and you can't compare it with your neighbors for coordination purposes. So you can't really imagine the area with that entire land use to start integrating your environmental thinking into it. And why this discussion is important is because you'll see, I'll show you examples of how the environmental layers then start getting diluted as we come to the development plans. You saw the master plan, it was green with a lot of analysis. But as you move into the DPs, that dilution starts happening. So in this example from Mumbai, this is the P South ward, where on the left you see, I've included that image to show you that there are slopes in that area, right? But the DP sheet on the right does not show any contours. It shows a no development zone. That green is a no development zone, fine. But without those contours, the areas around it have no land use response to the drainage patterns. And we see that in a lot of cities where new developments come up and then they face flash floods because there is no accountability for natural drainage patterns in the development plans. In this second example, what you see are the natural waterways marked on the DP. These pink lines that you see are the CRZ lines, but they stop. But there are no buffers that are shown for the rest of the river. The CRZ buffers are shown, but beyond that, nothing continues. Now, in this example, See, in a city like Mumbai, it is very difficult to have buffers and then suddenly have green zones around it. So that is not the aspiration. But without showing those lines, it is very difficult to track even an adaptive approach. Year after year, if new projects come up, it is very difficult to track what is happening and it is very difficult to document it. So these two images on the left and right are not very different from each other, but there is some response at least where there is a CRZ line as opposed to where it is not. So where new development is coming, these buffers can become very important as a response to environmental planning. But if you see in the DP, those industrial areas are coming right up till the water body, and who knows what kind of development will happen there. So while, yes, the argument is that in cities like Mumbai, buffers are difficult to implement, but just documenting that becomes important. In this example, this is the waterways, watercourses, natural water bodies map of Mumbai, but see how it translates in the DP. As a category does not exist in the development plan of Mumbai. It is guised under the open space category. So you see a green patch on the map, even though there is a water body as can be seen on the aerial on top. So all water bodies come under open spaces. So how do you even try to understand how that system works in a city? Like what are the interconnected waterways and tanks and ponds? How do you start documenting that? It becomes difficult. How do you even visualize that? And then how do you even understand its relationship with a larger regional map? And finally, this is Mumbai being the capital of flooding. This is an image of the flood spots. On the left, what you see is an older map of older DP sheet which used to show flooding areas. It used to show these flood zones, but the new DPs don't show it. They show points, and in this case, that point is also missing. So as a result, it becomes very difficult to have a more mitigatory land use related approach to solving these problems. This is an image of that same area flooding, and this is just last month's news article, same area flooding, and the solution is putting these big pumps and just shifting the problem elsewhere. So there is no land use response to solving these problems. Finally, like just coming back to the zoomed out map again of Maharashtra. This is the hydrology map of Maharashtra. And what we've done is we've overlaid this hydrology with the spatial planning boundaries. And it is not easy to find maps like these, right? We had to superimpose multiple layers from multiple places to create a map like this. Ideally, maps like these should be available for each state. At least the basic layers should be available for each state to just visualize how our rivers or how our water bodies are going through multiple jurisdictions where multiple instruments are at play. The conversation around environment planning has to be able to straddle these scales from the state, at least the state, to the local, to start understanding how do we come up with these coordination mechanisms, and what are the kind of instruments we need to tackle to come up with these long-term solutions. So again, we try to map the constraint and the opportunity as an area within the metropolitan and the area outside, and you begin to see patterns, right? Like that the state level body needs to talk to the metropolitan body through their regional plans, and then the local bodies need to talk through their development plans to come up with solutions. These are the last few slides. I just have some examples, positive examples.
4 minutes.
Yeah, just last couple of slides are left. So this is an example from Panvel. It's the newest municipal corporation in the MMR. And this is where the new airport is coming up. Here, the lines and the contours that you see are the CRZ contours. The coastal regulation zone is a national level regulation. It gets incorporated in state level CZMPs and finally finds its way into the DPs in some form or the other, irrespective of who is making the DPs. And over here, what you see in that blank is an SPA where they are still showing at least the CRZ lines. So maybe those kind of mechanism, I mean, it's not that they'll solve all the problems, but at least it's showing those lines.
CRZ lines are.
The coastal zone
No, no,
regulation.
what I'm.
So, in this
it's
map, you
color.
can see them, all the different lines are there. And they're captured in the maps. So at least those lines exist. This is a map of, this is a DP of Guwahati. It's showing contour lines. And some of the land use is also responding to it, though, yes, on ground, there are still problems that exist. Even Dehradun's map had contour lines shown, but Shimla and a few others did not. So, right, there is no consistency there. And this is the last example that I have. This is from Vasai Virar. It's a municipal corporation that is located, there's a Kihra. It's to the north of Mumbai city. And this is a very interesting area because on the left, it's a community where historically a lot of people have been in agriculture and fishing. And that left zone along the sea edge is this whole agricultural and farming zone. And on the right is a little hill. So in between is this low-lying area which has a lot of flooding and it is quite fertile. This is what it looks like. And this is the DP of that area. So now what you see on the right, that no development zone, once again, the contours are missing, but you do see the CRZ line, this red dotted line on the edge. What you also see here are these soak tanks, which are shown in the DP as a integrated sort of water management system. And the green, the darker green patch on the right, on the left that you see is a plantation zone. And this is something which was not part of the regulation or anything, but this is something that the people fought for and made sure it came in their DP. So this was a citizens movement that made sure that this plantation zone came in the development plan. And now the Vasai Virar development plan came in 2000. The new plan is coming up.
Is it a representative picture or the actual protest?
Actual picture.
Protest.
Yes, actual protest. It was called the Harita, Harit Vasai movement. And this zone, those pictures are what you see. This zone still exists, and they had opposed Sidco being they had opposed Sidco at that time. So what I want to say here is that you can have all the lines and all the buffers that you want on your maps. So these soak ponds, in reality, only one of them is built. The rest are not. They are shown on the map, but they are not built. So you can have all the buffers and lines on your maps, but what actually gets built is where citizens actually take charge and get it done. And I think the discussion on environment is a complex one. It needs to be decoded at each level. And at each level, one needs to attach the right instrument for delivering it. And as we come to the lower levels, we have to link it to livelihoods and we have to get people vested so that they claim those things from our development instruments. That's it.
Is it off? Okay. Thank you. Is this good or should I keep taking it? No, I think that this should work. This should work. So anyway, thank you. Thank you, Anuradha. That was a fascinating presentation. As you promised, plenty of pictures and quite enjoyable. Quickly, before I open it to the floor, I think the clarificatory question that I tried to ask, which Pushpaji said, but here is the substantive part of it. Since you said that you wanted to understand the jurisdictional dimension, and hence went with the vocabulary that was given, has it served your purpose?
To an extent, yes.
And did you feel that I should have done scalar organization of that analysis?
So I actually so I'll tell you what happens. Scalar is important, especially from the data management point of view, because what we saw in the field was that there was a repeat of the same exercise happening. I'll tell you a very interesting story from Patna, but actually we don't add detail. It's just a zoomed image of the same map. So the regional plan ends up doing very detailed work, and the some of the local area plans don't have the kind of detail. So scale is important, along with, I think, the administrative boundary, because ultimately you need to know who to coordinate with and who to hold responsible to continuously keep getting this done in the right way. And why I think administrative boundaries are important, because in this whole hierarchy, coordination is very important. Coordination and making sure, so even in the environmental discussion, we really need to understand which instrument is going to be managing that coordination. If it is the regional plan, then we need to give power to that regional body to control all that data. I will tell you what was happening in Patna. Patna is actually has a good example in its legislation, where they have a zonal plan, mandate to make a zonal plan. Now, in the plan, zones were there, which were loosely, which was slightly off the administrative zonal boundary. Now, first, they could have matched that. That would have made it easier to prorate the data and the analysis. They were having to do it based on that slight difference in the boundary. But what was happening over there was they had already prepared a layout scheme based on the same analysis, and then they were doing the zonal level analysis. So scales are important, but scales also need to be attached to the right plan and the boundary and the right goal and the right capacity, like I said in the beginning, right?
Right. I have a bunch of responses, but I won't do it now. But let's open the floor. Chikola. Yeah, let's start with questions around the room, and then we have plenty.
Thank you, Anuradha. I will go back to my first question, which seemed substantive. I thought it was clarificatory.
Thank you.
Because you have talked about spatial plan and climate risk in your title. But in your presentation, you have a disconnect. In the first part of analysis, where you only talk about what kind of plans exist, but you didn't even take one or two indicators whether those plans included climate mitigation measures or environmental indicators. So why did you do that is the first question. Second question is simpler. You said that going to Maharashtra, Nasik did a district regional development plan. But I thought that post 74th Amendment, Maharashtra Urban Development Act made it mandatory to make district development plans. So do you have any idea how many districts have made district development plans, like Nasik?
36 districts.
All of them have done that?
Have district
No, have they district development plans?
have district development plans. I don't know. I haven't seen those maps, but
Yeah. Sorry, please
no,
finish what.
I haven't
No.
seen those maps, and it's difficult to find that data.
Okay,
But
all of them have.
all of them are supposed to have.
Supposed to have, yes, but
spatial
have or not is a question.
is a question.
Yeah,
We verify.
that's a simple question. But let's go back to the first question.
The first question. So the scope of the first research was to start with mapping the existing frameworks. We did not look into the content of the development plans. It was not part of the scope of the first research. The only thing we checked was if they had an implementation section. And the basic contents. We did not look at it from an environmental content angle, because we did not have that capacity at that time. We were basically mapping the frameworks, because we had small teams going to all these cities. So we started off with at least creating that basic template. We can build all these layers. Some of the layers that we intend to build are capacity that needs to be answered, like how many planners exist, how many don't, and their citizen engagement mechanisms, we need to add more detail, and environment is another.
Right.
So quickly, I think the connect that you are looking for is because initially, if I understand correct, the way I understood is that she was presenting the spatial planning framework that is there. And the second part is with the assumption that climate risk is extraterritorial, extra jurisdictional,
That's a huge
multi-jurisdictional. We will have a sidebar conversation about it, that it's not a mistake. So it's because of that the kind of connection, the jurisdictional coordination is what she was trying to focus on, if I understand correct.
Yes.
But let's go with that.
Let's move on. Yeah.
Any other questions around the table? I thought you should be supposed. You're making quite a few.
I think. I wanted to ask about
Yes, I know. He was quite uncomfortable with the idea that Jharkhand doesn't have a town planning legislation. Would you like to clarify from what you have looked into?
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Regarding, first of all, the scale and the authority thing that you talked. So, when DDA was being established in 1957, the parliamentary debate itself said that there should not be the multiplicity of the authorities. So that's the reason why we go for the scalar level of scrutiny. And regarding the Jharkhand, there is Jharkhand Municipal Act and the other act. So most of the plans are being made by the Municipal Act itself. But the other authority is like they have no role to play there. So why?
But as long as Bihar had a town planning act, the successor state is supposed to inherit that, right?
They inherited that act back in 2000, but in 2012 Bihar amended that particular thing.
It's
Yeah.
just a technicality.
Right.
It is not there.
No, but there is accommodation, even though it is just the municipal act, there is an accommodation for spatial planning.
Yes.
So that is where, that is where the vocabulary is a problematic one for us, at least. It was quite confusing when we started looking at it. And, there is this entire bunch of terms that sometimes actually mean the same, and that is why we chose to work at the scalar level. But anyway, that is for another conversation. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Helfiger.
As you said that India is on the verge of national development, do you see any need for national level master framework for urban planning? Because we have the Gati Shakti plan running right now for it, but we need a national master plan for it. And we have a lot of maybe non-coordination between states because we have some good practices in Gujarat, some good practices in Mumbai. So maybe we can apply these practices at other states, but due to non-coordination, we don't have it. So do you believe we need a national level authority for this execution of these plans?
So I'm not a national level authority, but like I had said earlier, um, each level from national to local has a role to play, and each one of them has a different goal. So they should be doing their job, but then it has to trickle down to the lower levels. So that coordination is the key to manage. A lot of the national schemes are coming from the center, and then they're trying to have impact at the local level, but the learnings are at different levels, and they have to transfer laterally at those levels rather than sort of go at the top. But some of the, so like I mentioned, the CRZ, some of the regulations from the national level, environmental regulations of mandating certain environmental mapping and environmental buffers to be incorporated in these different state plans, that is something that can come from the center at least.
Well, that is a big challenge, particularly the infrastructural elements that pass through or otherwise close to the urban agglomerations uh, that are mandated through the Gati Shakti or otherwise part of the Gati Shakti. Very often, actually, the master planning process is very difficult for them to accommodate these, partly because, in fact, those agencies just simply don't share the data with the urban authorities. That's it. That is a separate conversation, yes. But let's finish the let's finish. Let's go with one round online, and then we'll come back to the room. So one question that I have here is by Mr. Parthav Tyagi. Since separate bodies exist for urban and rural planning, which body takes care of the suburban areas?
So it's different in every state. In Mumbai, like I was explaining, most of the state is covered. The district plans going to TPVD and the metropolitan areas under metropolitan authority, and then the ULBs under the municipal corporation or municipal council. But it is different in other states, and I haven't mapped it in other states, but in many other states there are areas that fall in no man's land where no one is really, there is no urban planning instrument above them. So we haven't systematically done that for all the states, but I do know that there are many
But
states.
that is also the reason why the regional planning framework came in, is to
Yes.
bring in certain amount of synergy between the urban and rural
Yes.
planning approaches. Now, the second question is from Partha Mukhopadhyay. What kind of variation is there in the field in participation methods to be used by plan makers? Is there any at all?
There is
Variation, I'm saying.
um,
Citizen participation methods.
And it is a complex answer because just if I just talk about suggestion objections and what is mandated in the legislation, even there some basic steps are missing in many states, right? Like even translation of those plans and documents into local languages and printing and publishing them in papers, even those basic steps are missing. But in terms of actually understanding how citizen participation varies and whether it is successful or not, it's a complex discussion. And I can give you examples from Mumbai again, where there was a robust citizen engagement mechanism where like ward-wise consultations were held and detailed suggestion objections were received. But there was a step missing, right? None of that engagement was ultimately converted into a land use output because the only instrument available was a DP. If we had a zonal level plan where we could actually come up with projects based on that citizen engagement, it would have been more successful. And as we go along, we've documented that in our report as well. The structure of engagement changes where initially, and we like from what kind of mechanisms can be used to pull people in, what kind of outputs are required. So I don't really know how to answer that.
No, I think one of the things that you could mention is partly if you have observed, because my understanding is that the law doesn't have any variety of methods for citizen participation other than the objections process. You put it out in the public domain and invite objections and suggestions. But the way it is executed by the planners who are either outsourced or otherwise within the department may vary sometimes, right?
It varies.
Yeah,
It varies.
at least we were.
It varies, but does it result in the output, or is it just an exercise and then there is fatigue?
Yeah, at least I can share one experience in the post-earthquake in Kutch. There were 4 master plans that were prepared. At least one master plan that was prepared for Bhuj had the planners, the outsourced planners, which happened to be the organization with which I used to work, which is Environmental Planning Collaborative, would carry the maps to the neighborhoods and then seek inputs about reconstruction. But again, it depends. I mean, it was not anyway, that kind of method of consultation was not prescribed within the Gujarat Town Planning Act.
So, I mean, we have for each level of planning, I mean, that's a separate discussion in itself, but what we've observed was that you need, so typically in the master planning process, there is very limited consultation that happens before the draft DP stage when all the parameters are getting decided for a proposed master plan. So then there is a robust way of trying to engage people at that time. What we had said was that in every place you need to start with identifying the voices in that city to see who are the people who are regularly going to come and engage, and then through them reach a larger audience. So there is a separate methodology for that. And then once you've um, collected the aspirations of the people, how to translate them into a citizen's brief that gets incorporated in the planning process. There is a separate methodology for that. So there are a variety of structures, and I'm happy to share those
Elaborate
separately.
for. So here's another question. I think it is similar to Mr. Paritosh Tyagi's, but a bit of elaborate one. Sujatapa Ray Chaudhary. In some states like Assam and Tamil Nadu, the DTCP, the state level town and country planning body, prepares master plans for smaller town and ULGs. I think ULBs, growths, I don't know, governance. Yeah. So ULGs, that's basically, I think, more, outgrowth perhaps, I thought. Naturally, this leads to gaps between ground reality and the plans. If the MCs, again, so many acronyms, were to do this, municipal corporations were to do this, perhaps the gaps would be lesser. Do you think that it should be the spatial planning should be concentrated at the municipal corporation level?
So in an ideal scenario, yes, it should start trickling down, but in reality, capacity is an issue, and that is where the problem lies, and that is why states like Gujarat are able to do all levels of plan at the authority level, because look at the capacity over there, right? In the government, in the authority, and with the institutes. But I don't know if that is possible elsewhere. And that is the reason why I was mentioning that when a when a national level scheme comes in, and they were requiring areas to make GIS based master plans, a lot of these states were creating capacity for the first time. Now, at that point, if the central scheme was designed well, they could have said, please create capacity at the right level, or start creating those capacities at the right level. Because we saw that, new departments were being set up for a short period, but at the state level. So that is the discussion to have, that, why can't these new schemes slowly start creating that local capacity at the right level? So much. Consultants fine, but if there is a section in there which says how do you transfer that and ensure that it runs in terms of, and how do you build those long-term partnerships, that's where identifying local institutes becomes very important, because they have to work in partnership. So again, it is all intertwined with the citizen engagement process as well, because those are the people who are going to continuously engage with this process.
So, a quick one-liner questions here. So let's wrap them up first. Is it possible for the state governments to impose rules and regulations to synchronize the planning process? I think it is yes, right?
Yes.
Would you like to add something more?
So, I mean, I think the act, so once it is in the act, whether it gets done or not is a separate story, but at least it is there. So if someone comes up with it later on, at least you can go back to the act and say, it is mandated. I think data management is something that experts really need to sit down and start coming up with national level sort of data management systems, and then trickling it down to states.
So, Do you plan to study all states of India? I thought you were
We have
studying.
studied, but we've done a cursory study. Like I said, I think the next step is to study these areas which are in between, outside the metropolitan realm and not under the.
So just a request for those people who are putting questions online, I think please keep it brief, otherwise they would get lost. So it's basically something to do with my capacity to, absorb it and pose it. So partly, but let's come back to the room. Debarshi and then Qatar Kapoor Sahib. Next, first.
I have a very short question. So I think one of the first, because you are mentioning about coordinating bodies. So when when this Mithi River Development Authority, Protection Authority came up, it was actually meant to coordinate between MMRDA and BMC. I think the post 2005. I mean, that was the mandate. But if we look at least in Delhi, at least we tried to map on DDA, Delhi Jal Board, and what are the kind of bodies are there. There was no coordinating body as such who can sort of look at more closely. So why do you think, I mean, when you say that there is a coordinating body and we constitute a body like Mithi River Development Authority, but don't you think like we do not talk more on the land laws part of it? Because I think essentially it becomes restricted. We talk about Urban Development Act or the DCPO Act, but I think a part of the reason why Mithi River Development Authority couldn't function the way it was envisaged is because I think the complex land laws that was, I think, the part of the Mithi River, that the encroachment or whatever, because in flood we essentially again gets very saturated when it comes to the encroachment debate. So I mean, so when you look at a coordinating body or the limits of law itself, or is it about just because I mean, here also in the presentation, we generally discussed about the town planning laws, but not what are the other kind of laws that impacts. The CRZ itself is a very complex level of law, and we are trying to mention. So I just wanted to, I mean, it's not a question, not a comment, but I just wanted to understand this a bit more. That
So I think it is all of it, right? The coordination has to have the right bodies, and those bodies need to have the right powers, and then the right laws as well. And it is an alignment of the stars that needs to happen. That's why it's such a slow process, and it is not an immediate impact process. And that is where, when you're dealing with, say, the Mithi River as well, you can't completely clean up the area and then have a different protected zone. It has to be slow. It has to be adaptive, and the moment communities along those areas start linking these environmental impact issues with their livelihoods, the solutions emerge from them. It doesn't matter what lines are shown and what are not, then they claim it. But right now there is a huge opportunity with the Dharavi development also happening. I mean, you hope that some of these environmental factors will come in. So let's see, we've not seen those plans. So let's see what happens.
Qatar Sahib.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. मैं सबसे पहले मैं आपसे क्षमा चाहता हूँ. You are academic. I'm a grassroots person. So I had also contacts with the people in school of planning and architecture over there. My brother is a fine architect, and I know all the professors over there. I talked with them too. Mr. Jabbala, you must know if you have been there, and
Qatar
Mr.
Sahib.
Balla, no.
Question.
Right? Now, my question is, humble submission is rather, कि हम स्मार्ट सिटीज की बात कर रहे हैं. हम जो बात कर रहे हैं स्मार्ट गवर्नमेंट के प्लान की स्मार्ट सिटी, but nobody want to talk about the smart villages. That's one over, but it down. Now nobody want to talk about
Out of syllabus Qatar Sahib.
next. थोड़ा सा मैं बात करूँ सर. तो सवाल है कि ये जो हमारा जो एकेडमिक वर्सेस ग्रासरूट का जो क्वेश्चन है, एकेडमिक अप्रोच में सबसे पहले हम आइडेंटिफिकेशन करते हैं सब्जेक्ट की, then is the planning, funding, implementation and maintenance, and then comes loopholes and bypass. This is all processes. आपका काम जो एकेडमिक का जो काम है वो आइडेंटिफिकेशन एंड प्लानिंग में खत्म हो जाता है. उसके आगे उनके बस का कुछ नहीं रहता है. फिर आती फंडिंग, पॉलिटिशियंस का में जैसे फंडिंग, इम्प्लीमेंटेज, मेंटेनेंस हिंदुस्तान में है ही नहीं. जहाँ तक फिर जो हमारे यहाँ जो these are grassroots observation, right?
सवाल.
फिर जो हमारे यहाँ जो सबसे बड़ी चीज जो है जो सबसे बड़ी चीज वो मैं खुल के कहना चाहता हूँ, हम कुछ भी कर ले, हमारी जीन्स में, हमारी हैबिट में है loopholes and bypasses. I mean bypassing the law and bylaws, construction bylaws and all the bylaws. वो तो हमारे जीन्स में, हम कभी उसको बंद कर ही नहीं सकते, और हर जगह हो रहा है।
कतार साहब, यहाँ पर मेरे पास 8 सवाल हैं। अच्छी बात
Right,
है।
man. So
It will not be fair to them.
right, so okay.
आप अगर टाइम ले लेंगे।
I'll finish, sir.
हाँ।
I'll finish. तो मेरा कहने का मतलब ये है मैम कि यहाँ हम जो कर सकते हैं ना, वो कर सकते हैं आइडेंटिफिकेशन एंड प्लानिंग, उसके बाद हमारे बस का कुछ नहीं।
थैंक यू। ओके, सो सवाल नहीं है इसका मतलब। सो नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन, अनलेस यू वांट टू रिस्पॉन्ड, does Karnataka, Bengaluru have planning departments? If there are they functioning? They are,
They are.
and they are functioning too.
In
So
fact,
you can tell perhaps the Bengaluru master plan situation.
they have a pretty good environmental layers in their plans as well, and their GIS management system is quite good as well. So those were some of the learnings.
So here is a kind of provocating comment, is that this spatial planning index exercise seems a bit redundant, since the town planning acts in each state is clear as to the extent of spatial planning in each state. Maharashtra Town Planning Department has prepared 36 regional plans for all districts, and is the other state apart from Goa that has prepared spatial plans for the entire state. Panvel is the oldest municipality in Maharashtra. Its jurisdiction has recently been increased. It's not the newest municipality. But this is a comment, but I don't think we need to respond, partly because it is only about Maharashtra. Right. No, I mean, in the sense, like, see, there is a bit of a precursor saying that wanted to share that I agree that mapping environmental features would help planning for, you know, climate risk, but he or she thinks that it is the SPI index is redundant. So how do you see the utility of SPI?
So I'll tell you, a lot of these cities that we map were making their plans for the first time. Town planning acts are getting amended. So in fact, I don't think it is redundant. In fact, it would be interesting to see how these states are doing 5 years from now. Have they made any changes? Have we seen any progress towards a standardized, decentralized system? And also, it is not saying that like the idea of the index was not to say that this should be done. It is just a backdrop against what you are mapping the current situation. So it would be interesting to see what is happening as these cities start making more and more plans.
So you're planning to continue to rate
It would be,
cities?
and
Right.
more parameters, in fact.
Right. Okay. So, was there any notices? Nope. So, Parul Sharma, of course, she appreciates your presentation. Considering the lack of coordination between the various ULBs, what is the possibility of institutionalizing a uniform system of assessment and self-reporting by each ULBs based on indicators like those you have already identified?
So I think at the time of the DP as well in Mumbai and the regional plan, there was discussion around having at least representation from each of the ULBs so that some form of coordination happens. But I don't think that got operationalized. But I once again come back to data. There is no reason why the regional body cannot control the environmental layers. And that is where it trickles down to the ULBs. Why can't those buffers be controlled by a regional body, and then those trickle down, and then as these ULBs make their land use plans, it needs to reflect in one place. We put a man on the moon. Why can't we do this simple thing of
Right.
making sure at least the plans show, for each state.
Right. So One quick question. I think I don't know whether you want to respond to it or not. What are the methods to depoliticize spatial planning? Pretty abstract. I wonder if you want to respond.
Actually, as we go down lower, again, as we go to uh, it shouldn't be depoliticized. Actually, all our plans should have economic and political goals mentioned and should have a strategy of achieving those goals, right? Clearly mention what your political and environmental goal is. Is it creating more jobs? Is it creating this? Is it creating? So they have, and then one has to have a strategy of achieving those goals. Our issue is that we state these goals, but we don't spatially distribute those goals. We have standard economic goals, but they're not spatially distributed, and we don't know which ward or which locality is contributing how much towards achieving that goal.
Right. So Partha has a bunch of questions. I think I'm seeing bunch of them, but we will. Partha, you should come back from Laos. We will meet you. So this is a question from Karthik Pandey. I would have. I think it's an important question, but if he had specified what kind of politicization that he had in his mind to depoliticize, perhaps it would have helped for a proper response. Anyway,
You can
quickly.
add to it
Right. No,
because of your
let's no.
experience.
It's your show. So Partho's questions are two at least. From your research, what are your impressions about the capacity of planning at different levels? That is one question. You can note it down. Second one is, since contours are now digitally available, what is the problem in overlaying this on the development plans? Or am I missing something? Or are you saying that the planners do not take contours into account when planning? Actually, I mean, that's my quick addition. So Anuradha has presented a bunch of those plans where these were used. I mean, that is post availability of these contours, but then you can add to that. Yeah.
So, I mean, we did see problems. Just showing contours is not enough. One of my colleagues had visited Guwahati, and he was saying that there are issues where there are plots of lands which are like the contour is going from right through that land, even though they are stepped contours. So, I mean, operationalizing these things have problems, and it is also like whether the contour came first or the land planning came first. But all I'm saying is that we need to start showing and acknowledging these things. Then the response will come slowly, whether through planning or from on ground changes. And then it gets documented also. So
Well,
that's
I
my-
think I'll ask my colleagues to stop forwarding those questions, any further questions, because I need to finish this bunch of them here with me. The quick one from Mr. Paratosh Tyagi again. You want? Oh, sorry. You have.
The
So sorry.
city one, actually, we don't have exact data on capacity from various states, but there is severe lack of capacity. And what we were discussing, right? Like planning courses are not there in colleges. So
You can mention about the Mumbai part.
yeah, in Mumbai, most of the colleges don't have urban planning courses. So you're not churning out.
Most or any colleges.
I mean, I don't want to say that, like maybe there is one or two, but
Provocative.
most of the ones in Mumbai don't have urban planning courses, right? So the posts are for urban planners. How do you deal with that gap? Uh, but capacity is a huge issue. And also the way we are tackling capacity is a huge issue, because we were having this discussion before this talk that it's not about having just nodal excellence centers from where capacity is being generated. Planning is a continuous effort, and it requires continuous capacity and partnerships. So each state needs to have that one institute that is going to be its data center, where like data sciences, you keep doing that research and creating data for the city. They also are these neutral places which will ensure citizen engagement, and they'll constantly churn out the right capacity for that state. So at least start with each state, and then see how we can generate more capacity.
So from Mr. Paratosh Tyagi again,
I really need to set up a separate meeting with Partha.
Partha, yes. Has any step been taken to incorporate the concept of Pura, Abdul Kalam's PURA, provision of urban
Urisa, I wouldn't know, I won't be, I
Pura?
don't know much about that.
Okay, former President Kalam. Actually, there was this scheme, Pura, provision of urban services in rural areas, right? So, come on. So, Ajay Katuri has a question. As of now, there's spatial planning policy or acts for district or sub-district level. Do you suggest or recommend any spatial strategy for national level planning? I think that question was asked there, considering climate change and hazards.
So, I mean, like we've discussed before, right? National level is the policy, and as it comes down, it becomes planning to urban design to architecture to engineering, and so there has to be some goal setting at the national level, but trickle it down through different capacities and instruments.
So PURA is a scheme that was central scheme, provision of urban amenities in rural areas. It's a typical convergence of central schemes with what you're talking, which is the statutory planning. Yes, there has been a convergence. I mean, that's the best. Prerna Yadav clarifies that Panvel is the newest municipal corporation. Earlier status was municipal council. Yeah, right. Why is it difficult for cities to implement their climate plans they want to achieve? Final closure.
So I guess first of all, I can talk about, I mean, the climate plans are difficult to achieve because the analysis is not linked to they are more like guidance and guidelines. They are not mandated plans. They don't come with statutory power. So it's difficult to implement these plans. Ideally, I mean, the climate action plans should have clear bifurcation into, what are the legislative changes, what are the community action, and what is individual behavioral change, so that you can at least channelize some of the action through legislative change. Like, we don't have a green building code which is mandated in DCRs. These are just suggestions and guidelines. So a lot of the climate action stuff is guidelines. So that's why it is difficult to.
Follow-up question about the contours. I think most of the cities has, I think we are having the discussion like few days back, drainage master plan, right? Even Bombay has a drainage master plan. So I think, so what should be an ideal role? I mean, you are expecting MMRDA to make those contours, or MMRDA should facilitate a drainage master plan that is already in place?
So city will have a drainage master plan, and Mumbai also has these detailed contours that are mapped. But that is a separate department, and the land planning department, the master plan is separate. There is no link between the two. So you can't visualize also where those low-lying areas are, what is exactly happening, because your solution is coming from the master plan. If the solution is going to come from your drainage plans, then it will be pumps like this. But if it is a long-term land use solution, the two need to start talking. It's very difficult to integrate the two.
Well, I don't know if you are a planner, but in any case, we have discussed this part. But one of the first steps of preparing a master plan, statutory master plan, is base map preparation. And if you look at the prescription of the base map preparation, it does include contour map preparation. And why don't people do it, update it, is a big question. That is a question that you can associate with capacity. That is a question you can associate it with a certain kind of nexus. That's a question that you can, it's a nexus between the outsourcing forces and the outsourced forces, or absence of funding very often. So the kind of imposition of the developmental plans over already existing data sets that Anuradha has shared, that itself are the questions to ask. Why were they prepared? You do have a 3D imagination of the version, of the land? Why do you impose a 2D version of it? Those questions, unfortunately, they are not discussed very often, brushed aside by certain kind of motives. But I don't think we ask the right kind of questions and then probe into those questions. So that's a bigger challenge. But then there is a bigger industrial complex these days anyway, with the way we produce master plans or statutory master plans without necessarily allocating the right kind of effort or funds for preparation of the base map, particularly with the availability of the newest technologies that you can produce. So any further you would like to add? In any case, we are past our time. So
No, but the challenges that you stated that is the reality, right? I mean, all this data is available, but why is it not overlaid? Why do we miss these things? I mean, ideally, development plans should be adding more detail to the regional plans, right? And that is your question of scale.
right. No, it is. There are plenty of. I think the fundamental takeaway is that is strengthening the statutory planning process, master planning process, which is unfortunately got diluted for a variety of reasons that we all are, I mean, we keep touching them, basically absence of access to data and things like why is it that the central agencies that put in infrastructural elements do not share their data with the local bodies? These are questions that we need to look a little deeper into it. And then there are also other suboptimal processes of master plan or statutory planning processes. So much to sort of understand. It's not that we and unpack. But thank you very much, Anuradha, for this. I mean, this is one of those that kept the entire group as well as the online listeners engaged. And one of those rare talks that we get on engaging specifically spatial elements, spatial planning elements. Thank you very much. And we really hope that there is a collaborator that we were talking about, Anuradha and her collaborator, perhaps Nishan. Maybe we will get another version of this spatial planning challenges and sort of. So stay tuned for it, hopefully sooner than later. Thank you very much, Anuradha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us.